Picture this. It's 50,000 years ago. The sun is barely up. The men grab their spears, their nerve, and whatever luck they can carry, and they walk out of camp to go chase down something that could kill them. And then, what? Does the camp just go quiet? Do the women sit by the fire, waiting, hoping, praying the men come back? That's the image most movies give you. A helpless woman, alone, useless without her man. It's completely wrong. What was actually happening back at camp while the men were gone might be more dangerous, more demanding, and honestly, more interesting than the hunt itself. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to look at cave woman completely differently. Here's the first thing almost nobody tells you. Hunting big animals, the kind you see in movies, often failed. A lot. Ambitious hunts for mammoths or bison could come back empty-handed more often than not. A spear thrown wrong, an animal that got away, a whole day lost. So if the tribe was relying only on that, they'd starve constantly. They didn't starve constantly. Why? Because the food that reliably kept everyone alive, day after day, season after season, usually wasn't coming from the hunt at all. It was coming from the camp and from the women. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies that survived into modern times, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Kung in southern Africa, found something that flips the whole story. In many of these societies, plant foods gathered by women made up the majority of daily calories: roots, nuts, berries, tubers, insects, shellfish along a coast. Reliable, predictable, every single day. The hunt brought glory. The gathering brought survival. So what were the women actually doing hour by hour? This wasn't sitting around. This was some of the hardest, most skill-heavy labor in the entire tribe. First, gathering itself was a full-body, all-day operation. Women often traveled in groups, sometimes for miles, carrying babies on their hips or backs the entire time. They needed to know which plants were food and which ones would kill you. That knowledge took years to build and was passed down mother to daughter, generation after generation. Get it wrong, and someone dies. Get it right, and you feed the whole tribe. Second, processing. Raw food from the ground usually isn't ready to eat. Roots need pounding, nuts need cracking. Some plants need to be soaked or cooked for hours just to remove natural toxins. This was slow, repetitive, physically exhausting work, and it had to happen every single day, hunt or no hunt. Third, and this one surprises people, tool making. We picture men flint-knapping spearheads around a fire, but archaeological evidence increasingly shows women crafting tools too: scrapers for hides, needles from bone, baskets and nets woven from plant fiber that could carry food, catch fish, or trap small animals. Small game trapping and fishing, in fact, were frequently a woman's job. Quieter, closer to camp, but a steady source of meat that didn't require a spear at all. Fourth, childcare, but not in the passive way we imagine. Kids in these communities were raised communally. Multiple women watched multiple children together while they worked, which meant no single woman was ever fully pinned down by a baby. This is actually one of the reasons anthropologists believe human childhood became so long compared to other animals. There were enough hands to support it. And fifth, defense. Camps weren't defenseless while the men were away. Evidence suggests women were capable of defending territory, using tools as weapons if needed, and some research even suggests occasional participation in hunts themselves, particularly for smaller game. The picture that emerges isn't a woman waiting by a fire. It's a woman running an entire parallel economy that was, arguably, more essential to survival than the hunt. So, what about when a woman didn't want to wait? This is where it gets genuinely fascinating, and where a lot of people get surprised because the answer isn't the same everywhere. Prehistoric humans weren't one single culture with one single rulebook. Different groups, different eras, different environments produced very different social norms. And a lot of what we know comes from combining fragmentary archaeological evidence with studies of hunter-gatherer societies that still exist or existed in recent history. So, Anthropologists are honest that we're reconstructing likely patterns, not reading a diary. With that said, here's what the evidence and research suggest. In some documented hunter-gatherer societies, particularly in parts of the Amazon, anthropologists have found something called partible paternity. It's the belief that a baby could be made from the contributions of more than one man. In these cultures, a woman having relationships with multiple men during pregnancy wasn't shameful. It was sometimes seen as practical. Each man who believed he might be the father had a reason to help provide for that child. More potential fathers meant more protection and more food for the kid if something happened to any one of them. Other groups studied by anthropologists show far more flexible pair bonding than the strict one husband, one wife model we assume today. Relationships that shifted, reformed, and didn't carry the same rigid expectations of exclusivity. But, and this matters, that wasn't universal. Other groups show strong evidence of monogamous pair bonds with real jealousy, real social consequences, and real enforcement of exclusivity. Pair bonding itself is actually considered one of the more unusual traits of human mating behavior compared to other primates, something that likely developed specifically because raising human children required so much sustained investment from both parents. So was it normal for a woman to approach another man while the men were hunting? The honest answer: it depended entirely on which group, which era, which environment you were born into. In some communities, it may have carried real practical and social benefits. In others, it could have caused real conflict. What's clear is that women weren't passive in this story either way. The decisions, the relationships, the social strategy, that was theirs to navigate, not something that simply happened to them. Here's what all of this adds up to. While the men were out chasing glory and risking their lives on the hunt, the camp didn't go quiet, and the women weren't waiting. They were gathering the majority of the tribe's food. They were crafting tools, weaving nets, tanning hides, raising children collectively, defending territory, and, in more than a few documented cultures, making their own decisions about relationships without asking permission. The helpless cave woman by the fire isn't history. It's a myth built centuries later by people who never bothered to look at the evidence. The truth is far more interesting. Two systems running in parallel, both essential, both demanding, and only one of them ever made it into the movies. If this changed the way you picture prehistoric life, hit subscribe. Because next time, we're going even further back into a world where survival meant something completely different from what you'd expect. I'll see you in the next one.